the most perverted king in history. The twisted life of Ferdinand VII, the king they prayed for and regretted in 1808. Spain cried tears of joy. After years of foreign rule under Napoleon's brother, the Spanish people welcomed back their rightful King Ferdinand VII. They called him El Decido, the desired one. Priests blessed his name. Crowds knelt in the streets. He was seen as the savior of Spanish tradition, a divine ruler sent to restore order. But behind that image, behind the saintly title, lay a man who would go on to become one of the most grotesquely perverse monarchs in recorded history. Ferdinand VII wasn't merely corrupt, he was rotten to the bone, a man who used his crown not to rule, but to feed an endless spiral of lust, humiliation, and physical decay. A body built for horror. Ferdinand was no golden prince. By his late 30s, he had become a physical monstrosity. Contemporary accounts describe him as obese to the point of immobility, riddled with gout, syphilis, and digestive diseases. His lower limbs were bloated, his face swollen and purple. He had no visible chin, his teeth had blackened and fallen out, and his skin emitted an almost unbearable stench of infection. But worse than all of this was the whispered horror that royal doctors would never speak aloud. His genitals were severely malformed. They were reportedly so distorted that normal intercourse was nearly impossible. In an era obsessed with dynastic survival, this was not only a personal tragedy, it was a national crisis. The wives who suffered and died. He married 4 times. His first 3 wives all died in their 20s, childless, exhausted, and, according to some rumors, traumatized by what happened inside their marriage beds. His 4th and final wife, Maria Cristina, was 23 years younger. She feared him, and for good reason. Ferdinand saw these women not as partners, but as instruments. His obsession with producing an heir drove him to force humiliating treatments upon his wives. Royal physicians were ordered to inspect them regularly, while Ferdinand Harfenay, wrapped in royal silk, demanded bizarre sexual rituals and fertility rites, some of which involved religious symbols and pagan invocations. When nothing worked, he blamed the women, calling them cursed or possessed. A palace of perverse medicine to restore his manhood, Ferdinand turned his royal chambers into a laboratory of horror. Quack doctors were summoned from across Europe. They injected him with untested tonics made from bull semen, powdered deer antler, and even ground-up mummies. One French surgeon suggested electrical stimulation of the genitals, which the king agreed to, screaming as volts of current were sent through his twisted flesh. Other methods were more medieval. Burning oils, leech therapy to the groin, heated brass rings. At one point, he reportedly sat for hours each day on a stone altar, believing it would channel divine masculinity from the Virgin Mary. Nothing worked. Lust masquerading as religion. As his frustration grew, so did his madness. Ferdinand began combining sex with religion, twisting both into an unholy spectacle. He would order young maidens from noble families to be brought into the palace dressed not in silks, but in the robes of saints and virgins. The more innocent they looked, the more excited he became. He was said to kneel before them, crying, praying, then groping them in a frenzy, convinced that their purity would cure him. In one horrific account, he made a young girl lie in a wooden cradle shaped like a manger, surrounded by candles, while priests chanted over her. None of this brought him pleasure, only more rage. The secret pornography of a king, beneath the palace, behind locked doors and iron chests, Ferdinand kept a secret collection. Hundreds of erotic paintings and anatomical drawings, some hundreds of years old. But he didn't collect them for entertainment. No, he studied them like war maps. With trembling hands, He would pore over every curve, every angle of anatomy, desperately trying to understand the mechanics of sex. He once commissioned a live performance by actors reenacting different positions from ancient Roman fresco. Witnesses say he would cry while watching, muttering, "Why not me? Why not me?" Madness at midnight. The older he grew, the worse his mental state became. Servants reported terrifying nights, the king screaming at shadows, accusing furniture of betrayal, smashing mirrors with his bare fists. Sometimes he would demand a young girl be brought to his room, then send her away in a rage. 5 minutes later, he talked to dead ancestors. He claimed God had cursed his bloodline. He once tried to impregnate a wax statue of the Virgin Mary, believing she would give him a child if he pleased her. When that failed, he went silent for days, refusing food, weeping into his pillow, surrounded by discarded prayer beads and broken wine glasses, humiliation as a weapon. Ferdinand ruled not by inspiring loyalty but by inflicting shame. Court officials who displeased him were publicly humiliated. One bishop was forced to crawl across the throne room floor on all fours, barking like a dog. Another noble was stripped naked and locked in a wine cellar for days because he spoke of the king's health. Even his allies feared him. His court was a theater of cruelty, a sick circus where humiliation was the coin of power. He didn't need to command armies. He could destroy you with a single glance and a whispered accusation. The rotting end of a rotten man. By 1833, Ferdinand was barely human. His legs had to be drained daily due to fluid buildup. His lower body was covered in sores and ulcers. He couldn't walk, couldn't speak clearly, and often hallucinated. His breath was described as worse than a rotting corpse. And yet he still summoned women, still believed he could produce an heir. One final girl was brought to his bed just 2 weeks before his death. She fled in terror, reportedly vomiting on the palace steps. He died in agony, screaming the name of a child that never existed. The corpse behind the crown. After his death, the royal physicians performed a secret autopsy. What they found was so disturbing that all documents were sealed. The surviving notes describe massive organ failure, necrosis of the genitals, and a deformity incompatible with human reproduction. The body was placed in a coffin lined with gold. The nation wept. Priests praised his soul. But the whispers never stopped. He was no king. He was a beast in a crown. 11. The legacy of a monster today. Ferdinand VII is remembered as the man who crushed Spain's liberal hopes, restored absolutist monarchy, and dragged his nation backward into tyranny. But beneath the political legacy lies something darker. He wasn't just a failed king. He was a monster of flesh and mind, deformed, depraved, and drowned in obsession. His story is a reminder of what happens when absolute power meets absolute madness. A crown can hide many things, but not the smell of rotten